We're all in the shot. Everybody's just talking about Arizona.
It was looking like
So.
Are
we recording?
Yeah.
Is this?
No, this is not the podcast.
This is the podcast.
Oh.
Yeah.
Speaking of,
this is up.
hello and welcome to the Average Bros Gym podcast. We're your hosts with your listener names Kory and Croy. Lead you through fitness, health, and life advice with no black and white takes. I always forget the actual intro. No polarizing takes, just genuine advice and good conversation. I should have pulled it up. It's actually right here. I could have just done that, but that's why I'm in this chair.
That's why it's the average bros.
That's why it's the average.
not superior bros. Not.
It's one of the reasons why.
We're not even 2 minutes in. Abby's already just throwing us on the bus. That's why they're the average.
As you can see, we do have a guest with us today. Welcome to Abby. Abby is a good. Welcome, Abby, to the show.
Thank you.
Yeah, Abby Bollum. Is that right? Bollum. Bollum. Wow, I was right.
Got it.
Yes. God. She's a good friend of both Kory and I, and just just been a staple in our lives for a while, even when we don't see each other for a year. It's kind of like their presence is always felt. I feel like I can always just text you, call you up, and it's just like nothing ever happened. You've given Kory and I a lot of deeper perspective and meaning on a lot of mundane things, I feel, and so I think that's really important. And so you were on our list for sure of people to come on the pod. I had an idea of what I wanted you to say. Yes.
I'm interested.
But then I texted and you were like, I want to talk about this, this, and this. And I was like, oh shit, okay,
I don't
cool.
care about that anymore.
Okay, cool. Okay.
I'm open.
That's important. though. So Abby, how are you doing? Talk to us about you.
How am I doing? I think really good right now. Navigating a lot of change in my life. It's good to be with you guys because I feel like when we worked together at Orange Theory, you two were always people that I could go to for whenever I needed anything, advice, someone to talk to, laughs.
We gave you advice. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Thanks. Yeah. We gave you advice.
It's
we gave you.
reciprocal.
Yeah. It's good. It's good.
Isn't it crazy to think about too? How many years ago was that we all came into one another's lives at Orange through work? So maybe we can start there, taking us back to when we all initially met. I mean, which being at Orange Theory, St. Louis Park, and all of a sudden I come walking through the door, and then there's this happily bubbly, what I soon to come find out is a triple Leo behind the behind the front desk.
It's a good place to start. So she is a triple Leo, guys. So that means for anybody who doesn't know,
What does that mean to you guys?
Not much.
Bubbly, a lot of energy. Oh gosh, I'm not great with zodiac stuff.
So we're gonna let you decipher this for us. But I will say to anybody listening, triple Leo is you've got your sun sign is your standard sign, right? That is your if someone says, "Hey, I'm a Sagittarius," that's typically they are a Sagittarius. That is their sun sign because that is their kind of primary one, quote unquote. Your other two signs are your moon and your rising, right? And they reflect apparently, supposedly, different parts of your personality and who you are. So Abby is a triple Leo, which means that her sun sign is in Leo, her moon is in Leo, and her rising is also in Leo. So Abby, walk us through what that means.
I don't really know.
Okay, all right. There we go.
I mean, I'm kind of one of the woo-woo girls, as you called them on a previous podcast.
Knew that would come back to bite me.
But also, I don't know. I don't overly identify with that either. And I feel like I use it as, a tool of reflection. But I think, caring, compassionate, I don't necessarily view myself as this, but I've been told, kind of can be, a leader and, a bright light in people's lives, which is, Leo's ruled by the sun, right? So you think about, that aspect of it. But I've also gotten, evolutionary astrology readings, which goes into your whole chart, and that's much more nuanced, and that feels true. So just going off your sun sign might not tell you a lot. And, you don't identify as a Scorpio, but that's only one piece of a giant puzzle.
It's a big puzzle that you opened up. I remember when I had to go through, not had to, but chose to, when we were just kind of chatting a little bit, and you're like, oh, you had me kind of identify the place where I was born, the time that I was born, so then it gives out your astrological chart and everything else. And you're like, holy shit, you got 6 things in Scorpio. I'm like, I don't even know what that means. But yeah, no, you were just I remember walking into Orange Theory, and then as our relationship obviously has developed to where it is now. I think that was a good way that you kind of put it, this bright light, you do just have a way of coming into the room and changing the dynamic. Like everyone kind of like feel your presence. Like, oh, you know, there's Abby, and it's been such a fun journey with you over these like last several years, and it's been like, as Kory and I were talking about, so excited to like have you on today to kind of just like again explore, talk about all the good things, you know. So going from Orange Theory, where we like all started, to, you know, and again that's kind of like where this whole journey of ours like interplays at. So kind of take us through like a little bit of the Orange Theory, that whole background, and like where, I mean, we come to find ourselves on a podcast here just a couple years later.
Yeah. I mean, Orange Theory was like a wild world. I didn't really know.
It was a wild world.
Yeah, a whole lot. I just knew like moving my body had helped me a lot, and I wanted to like work in a space that facilitated like wellness of some sort. And I ended up there with you guys, and for a few years. And then when COVID happened, gym shut down, and it was like time to kind of reflect on like, what do I want to do? Where do I want to go? And like you guys coach, right? You get to like motivate and inspire and like bring your personalities. What I was doing at Orange Theory is like sales, and I still felt like I was just like pitching something to people in like a prepackaged, this should be right for you, versus like, who are you? What do you need? What are your barriers? Like, let me get to know you. And so like in the pandemic, I reflected kind of on my life and ended up going back to school for addiction counseling. And I feel like my own journey with substances and periods of sobriety, and that impacted me a lot. And my career has always like kind of followed like my trajectory in my life as well. And so in the past like 2 years since we worked together, it's been much more like mental health focused, right? And like that aspect of a person and getting to know people in maybe more, I don't know, more depth in a way, and less focus on like the physicality aspect of like moving your body. So it's been kind of an interesting journey that's also like helped me reflect on my own self, my own mental health, what I need, what movement looks like to me. Yeah. I don't know.
Because after Orange Theory, you went to, and you said during COVID, that was kind of like that pivotal moment. I mean, for all of us, we were right in our late 20s. I mean, at that point, right? Late 20s.
2020.
Yeah.
Yeah, 29, you know? 30.
I mean, so kind of like a pivotal time. Like, I mean, obviously, like within our.
Oh God, how old am I now?
I mean, like right, like quarter life, and you know, as you mentioned, like Kory and I, we have continued coaching, and you know, kind of found our passion within that. Our, you know, that culmination point between like your passion and your purpose. I like to try to think about it as, and you were saying that at Orange Theory, didn't necessarily feel as though that your passion and your purpose had kind of aligned at that stage in your life, and then you get into, you said counseling. Addiction, kind of what, and you know, has that been always an area that you had been interested in about and passionate about, or what was it during that time that you were like, hey, let's delve into this?
Yeah, I mean, I think I reflected on a lot of my like use of substances and how I used it to cope with life and like social anxiety and things like that, and ability to connect with people. And so in my own journey in like stopping drinking and managing my relationship with different substances like marijuana, it helped me promote a lot of positive change within my life, and I felt like I wanted to do the same thing for other people. And so counseling, I don't know, I view more so what I do as like promoting any positive change, right? Like recovery in general is like helping people bring positive change into their life, which I think you two are very passionate about as well in a lot of different aspects. It just is like channeled in fitness for both of you.
So how do you like take us through kind of like, I mean, you don't have to go into super big detail about what you're specifically what you're doing, but take us through kind of like, I don't know, in a given day or in a given week, kind of, I guess like as far as counseling people, kind of what does that look like, and kind of how do you see that change? Like how do you see that positive change?
Yeah. So I work at a outpatient facility. So I work at LGBTQ treatment facility. So everyone there is part of that community. We do group. I run group 4 days a week, 3 hours a day. So I'm with about 14 to 16 clients in like 12 hours of programming every week. So we're like in a group dynamic, right? We're kind of like seeing how each person's interpersonal stuff is coming up and working through that. And then I meet with people individually as well each week. So that means like individual 30-minute, hour-long sessions with folks. And I work with them for, our program is 5 months. So that is really rewarding to me, to like see progress over time, versus just like a residential facility getting someone like stabilized in their mental health, just like getting them to a baseline of like functionality. I get to really kind of see people embrace recovery and like a sober lifestyle, and really see a lot of aspects of people's lives change when they come through. And just seeing, I think the biggest thing, and like kind of what Orange Theory as well promotes, is seeing how people react and support each other in really positive community spaces. Like where I work is like a super safe space, or a safer space for the LGBTQ community. So when people can enter into that and automatically know that they're like in a facility that understands what they're going through to some extent, and can offer services and support and like unique challenges that they're going through, like guards come down and people get to open up and be vulnerable. And I feel like we see that at Orange Theory too. Like it's in a different capacity, but like the building of community, long-lasting relationships, like seeing what happens when people come together to like promote positive change within themselves in a community space. It's like really cool to see.
Well, it's so incredibly like powerful, and you had always been kind of interested in that in that space. I think both personally and both within your career as well. Like what was the, I can't remember, what was the one gym that you were working at? That
Solcana Fitness.
Solcana, right? And that also geared primarily towards the LGBTQ community, correct?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So I was there for a year when I was in school. So I worked there part-time and did like membership stuff as well. Mm-hmm. But that was cool to see them have like beginner-friendly classes, big body fitness classes. Trans folks could come in and have exclusive classes to them, and really like learn about different needs, especially when people are going through different mental health challenges, right? Like you can't always just come in and start like aggressively moving your body, like understanding what might come up for people when they start moving their body for the first time. So I felt like I got a different aspect of kind of merging like queer community, mental health, and fitness working at Solcana. So that was a cool experience.
What kind of like, and I guess what kind of differences did you see in terms of, how, let's say take like a group fitness class and anywhere else where it's like, okay, you're having the very specific exercise of the day, you're having your routine of the day, everybody's kind of moving very homogeneously in that sense. And then you've, of course, got injuries, so you have options, things like that too. But at a space like that, or just in your own life, like take us through kind of like the difference in like, okay, well, if someone is experiencing or going through this traumatic event, or like going through something where it's like they don't feel safe outside of here, like how does that movement differ?
Yeah. I think it's like really common in the spaces that I work at currently with the LGBTQ community. I mean, just like rates of discrimination and harassment and trauma are inherently a lot higher. So you just kind of enter into a space not necessarily knowing exactly what everyone's carrying, but with awareness that like stuff might come up. And I think encouraging people to be able to take care of themselves. So like in my rooms, what I often will do of like, if you need to leave, right? Like we have breaks, but if you need to take care of yourself, you need to get up, you need to move. You can do that, right? You have permission, you have autonomy of agency over your own body. Just because I instruct you to do something doesn't mean you're stuck there, right? There are people that might be experiencing or commonly experience panic attacks, and I'm like, what do you need if that is happening, right? Like, what is helpful for you? Is it helpful for me to bring you out of the room, just give you space alone? In a gym setting, that might be like taking someone to a quiet space, giving them like earbuds or earphones to like quiet out sensory stuff, changing the environment, just letting people like ground back into a safe space. But I think like lifting weights and movement can be incredibly transformational for reconnecting and like processing trauma in the body, but there has to be awareness around like what might come up and what might be present, because I've also seen it where like people don't feel like they have agency, are pushed way too hard, like are not okay after, and don't feel safe coming back to spaces too. So it's like trainers, staff, even people in rooms, like having awareness around like the potentiality for stuff to be there for folks.
Yeah, so it's really important to have those counselors and whomever you like, whatever title you have, like very important to have them be trained in that and understand like, there's no one size fits all approach to kind of what you guys are doing, but like here are some potential outcomes, potential things that you can do to kind of help facilitate growth and healing in someone who is dealing with something that is more aggressive than like a layman, right? Yeah, that's interesting. Because I know too, like, and this is kind of a generalized thing, but I know that like even yoga in a lot of ways, and there's many different styles and brands of it, of course. Like I don't know what the hell I'm talking about, but but like there's I know that like those positions and hanging there and just being connected to your body. I mean, I would remember that when I would do it here or like at home or wherever, it would take me like a good 20 minutes to actually feel my heart rate come down and like feel my thoughts actually kind of focus.
Yeah.
And then like, but I know a lot of people do have like really strong emotional reactions to those kinds of things. Like all of a sudden they might really get in touch with like how they're feeling for the first time in a while, or have like a revelation, like just cry, like just literally they have like emotional release almost.
Well, that's how like my whole journey in like mental health recovery and everything started, was like through yoga. I like started moving my body for the first time in like 4 years. This was like pre-Orange Theory, and I went to dark yoga classes at like 8 p.m. in the dark, and I would just like sob. We'd like get into positions, and I'm like, what the fuck is happening?
Why am I crying?
Yeah. And like when I did my yoga teacher training, there were classes, right? Like I wasn't ingesting substances. We were like in like grueling physical spots and meditation for like hours at a time. But I remember like one time in Downward Dog, I'm just like sobbing and there's snot like coming down my nose.
Hey, at least the room is dark.
Like a wreck. But like that sort of release, like when we think about like the release of what our bodies hold, like we carry so much. I remember being like, this is the first time in 20 whatever years that I've like fucking felt these things. And it can be overwhelming, especially if you don't know that there's like the possibility that might happen. But it also is like incredibly liberating at the same time to like be in my body and be with that stuff, and also be in a safe place where I was held to move through that.
Well, and it's interesting that you bring up and you touched on it previously with like the impact that the environment and the space that you're within and the people that you are surrounded with can have on your ability to be able to tap into those emotions or those thoughts. And for the first time you're sitting there in the dark, going through that yoga, like what was it about that space specifically, in that moment, if you can kind of reflect back, go back into that state that allowed you to finally feel comfortable tapping into those thoughts and feelings and those emotions?
Yeah. I mean, I think kind of what Croy was saying, when it takes a little bit of time and then you're finally able to like relax and like stop the busyness. Like I think in our society it's like go, and constantly I wake up and I have like my to-do list and da-da-da-da-da. And I was working at the time for a catering company and managing a lot and really in like an unhealthy workspace.
And it was like a lot that you had on the docket. Like what were the hours? I mean, like
summertime could be like 60, 70 hours, like all weekend long. Friday days would be like 9 a.m. to 1 a.m. And then the next morning the same thing over and over. And I started going to these classes and it was like stillness for the first time. And so then you're just like left with whatever's there, right? Like when you stop moving, it could be a variety of things. It could be sadness, it could be anger, it could be happiness and joy, or like a deep presence or like a deep groundedness within yourself. But it's just like being and feeling versus like the doing that we often, it's very easy to get caught up in.
Oh yeah, and like you wonder how, like what percentage of like the population is just stuck on that like rat wheel where it's just spinning and spinning and spinning. They're going through the same motions and patterns day after day after day, and they never get that chance to just unplug or touch in with their body. And whether that's in the form of fitness, in could be strength training or running or yoga, like whatever that practice is that you're doing, like how many people don't readily have that available, or do they really like willingly want to seek that out and understand the importance of that?
Well, I remember like there was a time I was teaching a yoga class, a dark yoga class, and we did an extended shavasana, so like laying there in stillness, and I was like, it's gonna be an extended shavasana, and she was like, I'm going to leave.
Like just couldn't handle
it's too much, that's not what I'm here for, right? And like kind of being able to meet people where they're at too, because I think I was at a very judgmental place
So this podcast, no, sorry, go ahead, today.
Full circle.
Oh my God, yeah.
That's why I'm here. But I used to be like, I think judgmental in a sense of like, I would look at her and be like, oh my God, you can't like sit with yourself. Like, come on, just like be with it. But also that can be too much too for someone's body, and saying like, if you can only be in that space for a minute and then you need to get up. And it's like, I like to think about like finding the edge of our comfort zone, not like diving in where you're forced to like sit with everything. And that can be like too much and overwhelming for the body and activating for the nervous system and all of those things. But like what feels like it pushes the edge of your comfort zone with still like feeling safe. So that's kind of how I approach things now. It's like, okay, well, can you sit in Shavasana for a minute and a half, 2 minutes? You know, maybe you don't have to do the full 10 minutes or something like that. So, I don't know.
Well, it's really hard to go into, and I don't know if either of you, I mean, obviously it sounds like you do a fair bit of yoga.
I mean,
maybe not Croy on that side.
You don't think I do yoga?
Remember when we went to booty yoga together?
Yes, I went to booty yoga with Abby one time.
I did not.
That was...
We should go together.
Honestly, it was pretty fun. It was really challenging. It was almost like it wasn't even like twerking. I mean, it was twerking. It was a little bit twerking. This was how many moons ago? I have no idea, but it was a lot of like what felt like a lot of like dancing, obviously, but it was a lot of like very rhythmic dancing. It was very like easy numbers, like step, 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 but it was really challenging. And I had like, we had no weights, and you're holding your elbows up here.
I remember you were like holding your arms, and you're like,
I'm so tired. I'm so tired.
We're just doing it. We're in, like, it's just a different form of movement. Like, you're trained in like the power, the fast, the like speed, that versus like the holding and the staying and the like.
Yeah. It's a different set of muscles. It's like different energy system. And it's a different set of just like, I don't know, just like mental toughness.
Mm-hmm.
That's talking about the marathon that I did a couple of years ago. I experienced a lot of that same like mental and emotional release, being able to just run for that amount of distance. Now that was physically challenging in a different way than just being able to sit in stillness and your body's not moving. You're really being in touch with like your breath and being very present. I felt like running for myself and for a lot of people that might lift or whatever that they might do, they're tapping into those same type of things, and it's not necessarily that one is better or worse than the other, but you're just where's that opportunity within your day to be able to be very in tune with your mental state, like with your emotions, and sitting in that uncomfortable space, Mm-hmm.
I can imagine, because you can only listen to music or like podcasts or like books on tape or for so long. You went through that whole marathon without any sort of like music, right? Or were you listening to music along the way?
No, during like the runs, I would listen to like just like some motivational and stuff like that. But it was not. I wasn't just going on the run.
Just silence, just pure silence.
If it was a shorter run, I'd go into nature or something like that.
For this,
I
ran a half marathon. It's bad.
Wait.
I didn't train for it. It was so terrible.
We didn't say anything.
But I was like it was in wine country in like California, and I didn't get service, and I didn't download music, and so I was like stuck with silence.
Yeah.
And I didn't train. It was like the most torturous event of my life.
This is terrible.
I wouldn't recommend train for any.
When was this?
This was like
My roommate's gaming in another room.
Pre-starting yoga.
Yeah.
It was like when I was working that awful job, and I was like trying to get myself
You're trying to do something
So I signed up for a half marathon thinking like, okay, if I sign up for this thing, then it'll force me to train and move my body. I didn't do that. I just I like ran on a treadmill twice.
No, this is great. This is great because people out there are going to feel the exact same way.
Or they've done the exact same
thing.
Mm-hmm.
And then I got to mile 9 on the half marathon, and my calves cramped up.
Oh,
and I was this is karma because I'm an idiot. Why did I?
But hold up, though. But you ran.
That was some negative self-talk. I take that back.
You ran 9 miles with like no training. It's pretty fucking impressive. Yeah. A lot of people can't do that. And no shade at them, but that's pretty cool. Yeah. So there you go. That's positive. That's a silver lining.
Look at that. Thanks.
Congratulations. That's like, honestly, I do that a lot. I mean, like, Kory and I, we're both in the fitness space, and I'm sure you experience this a lot as well, where people tend to And it's not necessarily all like, oh yeah, like I suck, I'm terrible. Like it's not. It's like negative self talk. A lot of the time is actually not that blatant. But what it is those little small little like put downs, or those small kind of like lack of belief. Like, I had a member come like the other day, and she has been a member for at least a year, but she's really struggled with consistency. She'll kind of disappear for like a month at a time, like, and it's not for anything. It's because she's just not getting in. And the other day she came out of class and she's like, she's been really consistent in the last like 2 months. It's been awesome to see her like almost every day. And I kind of mentioned that to her, and she's like, oh, it took me a year, like I'm finally getting there. I'm like, yeah, but you've also been here for a year and you haven't quit. You've kept coming in. So even though it's taken you a year to get consistent and like what you think to be consistent, like you haven't given up in that year.
Yeah.
So it's like, and she's like, oh yeah, that's a good point. I'm like, yeah. So it's like a lot of the time that is how like self-talk is expressed, is like just those small little things, but maybe the outside observer who's maybe seen that a lot is like, actually, no, that's kind of really cool that you're doing that. So
yeah, I feel like what you do in your jobs in that sense is like very similar as well, right? And like people come into treatment as well with like these certain goals, or like I'm gonna be completely sober, and if that falls, like what then, right? And how do we respond to ourselves with like compassion and grace and not shame? And I had one client who has been trying to get sober for like 24 years and always reaches like 60 or 90 days. And like it's just a cycle, right? And I'm like, you have kept showing up for yourself for 24 years. You haven't given up, right?
Yeah.
Like you are also the example of recovery that we need in the rooms. We need the people that have had 15 years of sobriety, completely abstinent, but you represent a different type of struggle. And that is like, we need representation in what it looks like when we can't achieve what we think we should. And like, how do we still continue to show up? How do we continue to respond to others and ourselves with, like, I don't know, I just look at someone like him and it could easily just been like, fuck this shit. I'm gonna kind of let my life crumble from here, right? Or like your person at the gym, I'm just never gonna show up in this space again because I can't stick to it. And it's like, actually, no, you keep showing up, and that's so important. Just that fact.
Well, I think it's unfortunate that a lot of those stories aren't the ones that are shared or glamorized. Like you're always either seeing or viewing the super successful individual who overcame all of the hardships and tragedies or whatever that was present within their life. You either see that, or you see the complete opposite end of that spectrum, like, oh wow, they just flamed out, burned out, hardcore crash. You don't, oftentimes the vast majority of us are somewhere in that middle, currently going through whatever little struggle that we all are facing at the time, but those stories aren't as readily shared or glorified as much. And like, I think that's just kind of unfortunate.
Yeah. Just like normalizing the humanness in all of us, and that like the less than perfect parts.
So do you, like, what are some of those things that you, when you're sitting across from somebody, and it could be either, the individual that you were just talking about who you've been working with for quite some time, who has been going through some hardships for, you said, going on a quarter century, like 24, 25 years. You get the other individual who's like just coming in, presenting like, new issues. Now, is that dynamic, are you just kind of exploring their history with whatever situation is kind of present? What are some like actionable things that you maybe have them do outside of that session? Kind of take us through, like, what do you do like within that session itself? Is it dependent upon the person, or I'm just kind of curious, like, what goes on within those walls, depending upon what you're able to actually, talk about or discuss.
There's HIPAA for sure.
But like, not like giving like specific examples.
Well, this one person,
fucking Dan. Like,
it's always Dan, isn't it? Fucking Dan.
I think I think I said earlier, like, meeting people where they're at is really huge. And also, like, I can have expectations for somebody and where they should be, but I want to try to remove that and, like, what are their goals? How can I help them accomplish what they want to? Like, I might project something onto them that I think that they should do, right? Like, and that has value, but also how do I help them and support them in what they're trying to achieve? And sometimes that might need a little reframe. Like, I don't know how to
like both for
answer that.
Well, I guess like in both for you, like you touched on an interesting aspect too there, where it's like what goals you might have for them, might not necessarily align with what might be readily attainable or achievable for where they're at. I oftentimes find myself coming into that conflict a little bit too, where I'm sitting down with a client that I'm working with, and they might have some various, health, fitness, weight loss, whatever goal, and then I'm sitting there like, oh man, you could be here in like 2-3 months. Like all we got to do is do this, that, the other thing. It's like, hold on, easy. I got to damper maybe somewhat of my own expectations in a way.
Not everyone's trying to be a CrossFit Games athlete.
Well, not that, just like maybe slightly above average.
Well, do you feel, and Kory, this could be a deeper question, but do you feel like you project a little bit? Do you feel like you kind of take like how hard you'd want to train or how hard you want to work, and then?
Oh, I feel like there's probably definitely a element to that.
And obviously, you've been a coach for a while, so it's like you are also very like knowledgeable about that. So it's not like you're like, you're not like unaware of those things because you're very aware of yourself. But like, do you feel like you do that sometimes?
Oh yeah, 100%. Where how I would want to approach that situation that I'm sitting across from somebody and they're, again, trying to maybe cut down or wanting to train or whatever that it might be. Yeah, I might, as you mentioned, project how I would handle the situation or how I would go about doing it, and maybe that might not be the most productive or conducive for them in that situation. And I feel like that takes a lot of self-awareness, which I think for all of us within the spaces that we've worked within, we've kind of at one point or time or another probably each have done that or been like, I kind of stepped in my own foot on that one.
I almost do it in the opposite direction because I think sometimes I get really.
Oh, that's interesting too.
Well, I get very like I try to be like I'm highly empathetic.
More in that.
Yeah, you and me. Because like I for some I always think too like I think like let's take the idea of like counting macros or counting calories, right? Like you can achieve your fitness goals and all those things without doing that. You don't have to do that. However, I think some people could really benefit from it, and there are times where I find myself like not really suggesting or not really talking about it much because I'm like, well, if we do this and this, which is true, but there are people that maybe want to take it that next level, and I'm also very cautious of it, right? Because I also think like too, I think they can be very triggering for people for people have different backgrounds depending on how they grew up, depending on kind of what societal expectations are placed on them, whether or not they've had eating disorders, things like that, and so I'm very cautious about recommending that. But there are people that, they are quote unquote totally fine. Like they would do well with that. And so sometimes I don't recommend it when maybe I could. Yeah. And so I find that, I might be like the similar thing, but I'm kind of like, I'm almost too conservative with it sometimes. So that's challenging.
You don't want to potentially, it could be something that could be polarizing either way. And you just like kind of avoid almost like the potentiality that could be negative for them, even though you think it could be positive at the same time. Yeah,
like it's mostly like I think that I'm like, well, this could be this, when it's really they might want just a hard decision, one or the other, and they would do fine either way.
Sometimes people want like the directness, and I feel like Kory can be like that person.
Kory's direct. Yeah, it's like depends on who I'm talking to. Obviously, like there are some people that I feel much more comfortable, kind of just not being a dick to, but like you know what I mean. Like
It really does come down to that. What is that relationship?
What's that bond?
That is true.
What is that with that person
that
you
have?
have?
All what we're doing in our jobs is building relationships at the end of the day.
Oh yeah.
It's like the core underlying foundation of all of it, and then we're just subsetting into like helping people with different goals in different areas of their life.
It is funny when you just put it that way. Again, how much of it just comes down to that relationship, those interpersonal dynamics that you have with that individual, that member, that friend, that client that you're sitting across, and your ability to be able to, potentially be such a pivotal point within their journey in this life of getting to be the healthiest, happiest version of themselves, maybe in a more of a physical space as Croy and I tend to like work within, and then, mental, emotional as pertains to you, so we all have that kind of like little blend together, which is cool.
Yeah. Well, and in counseling, the biggest factor in like a client's success is the trust that they have with the counselor they're working with. And I feel like that is similar in fitness, right? And like, this is something I said to Kory earlier, but like people show up.
You guys hung out without me?
Yeah.
I got a coffee.
Trigger your abandonment wounds. Do you want to talk about it?
Actually, that's actually
one
thing.
So into that.
That's one thing I don't have is abandonment. Yeah. I know. It's like the one thing.
No, it's just stereotypical.
It's like, hold up, nope. That one
actually, so everything else, no.
Like I do have some issues. Not that.
Oh yeah, for sure.
But like people show up for you too as individual people? Like, people are subscribed, yes, to like the Orange Theory brand, but even more so to like Croy, to Kory as like a person, who they are. And it's like, because they trust you as a person, they subscribe to like your witty humor and dance moves. And
it has not changed.
Yeah, I haven't been to a class in 3 years, but I just imagine.
Yep,
Sometimes I drive by and I've seen you, and it's the
Have
same.
you really? Jesus.
It's so creepy. I'm not a stalker.
A little bit.
But if I'm on that road, I'm gonna look in, and you've been in there before.
I'm there a lot.
You are. Right? And I don't know, and I view that similarly in counseling. It's like when we can bring like pieces of ourselves to the table, then people do trust genuinely, and we have people's like best intentions at heart. Mm-hmm. And that's what we can go off of.
And you're really meeting them in a very vulnerable spot as well, I would say. I mean, not that we don't, but I mean, like, they're coming to you.
I would say this is much more vulnerable typically.
Yeah, but like, they are coming to you specifically to like, hey, I need to address these wounds.
I mean, they're like, I think about a client that I had that's like, I need help or I will die. Right? Like, that's a level, and like, that's what's affected my mental health so much, is like the pressure I put on myself that like almost has paralyzed me in like the last 6 months of like, I have these people, I have no backup at work. You know, it's an understaffed industry field.
In general,
absolutely,
yeah.
Healthcare. And then it's like that pressure, right? Of like, I need to show up, and like, I need to be present and have resources and be paying attention to subtle cues, or like, people may die.
Mm-hmm. Like, how do you go about? I can't even imagine what it must be like to be in that chair for the first time. Like, I'm a mental health practitioner. I'm a counselor. And this person is reliant upon me in this situation to make drastic improvements in their health. And they tell you in that moment, like, or I might like kill myself. I mean, like, how do you handle like that? All of a sudden, that enormity of that.
Well, part of it is like what we try to do, and what I get like supervision on is having a little bit of that boundary of detachment, right? Like, I am there, but they're not relying on me. They're still like in charge of their own life, right? And I can do my very best, but like, I also don't want to have like a codependent dynamic where I'm like, they're relying on me and they need to be okay, right? Like, that can be really unhealthy.
Yeah, you make yourself available at all times.
Yeah.
And I think like that's really tough too, because I think when you're like, if anybody has had a friend or partner or family member or anything like that who has suffered from whatever, addiction, mental health, and worse, there's always that idea of like, oh my God, if I don't help them, whatever, or like, oh, I need to be able to provide them with this and this and this. And a lot of times, I've had friends that have taken their own lives. And there's always that initial feeling of like, man, what could I have done differently? I should have reached out more. I should have done this or that. And there becomes a certain time, I think, when you have to accept the fact that, there's not more you could have done. Like, because you could be the best counselor is. You could be as available as possible. And if someone wants to go through with something, or they want to, they have that drive, that need to continue using whatever it is, like, you can't fix them. Like, you can't fix that problem. You're there as a resource, and that's just my perspective on it. But
yeah, and in any relationships, I think it's important that you touched on like how that has personally impacted you, because you are such like a giver. That's how I kind of view you, as like really wanting to support people and help people, but almost to like a detriment sometimes in your own life, where you can't fix people, right? Like, we can't be that only lifeline for another person, and being able to separate from that can be hard. Especially, like, I don't know, I view us all as like having pretty big hearts in general.
Oh yeah, true.
Carrying a decent amount.
And I feel like that only like comes with just more years within that area, within that field, within that practice of being in those situations and working with those individuals, to not have that brought back home with you. Like, there's still instances, though, I can imagine for like all of us, where it's like, oh man, it just kind of weighed heavy on me a little bit today. Like, I need to recharge the batteries in some capacity.
Well, and I feel like it's so important for me to have people who are pouring into me and giving and showing up for me so that I can show up for other people.
Right.
Yeah.
It doesn't work if it's just me showing up for my clients and I don't have my own pillars of support. Like, I think that's the biggest thing is, like, being able to support people in those places. You also need people to lean on to.
So how do you, maybe detach is maybe the wrong word for it, but maybe there's not a great word for it, but how do you then separate that? How do you, after you've created that boundary, how do you then go home and like you are like living your own life and you don't feel that like, oh man, I could have fucking done this today, or like, oh, I could have, they said this and I said this and I should have said something different. Like how do you then, I know we all probably feel that in different capacities, but how do you then kind of like separate yourself from that?
I think I'm still learning. Like,
Yeah.
I think that's, like, one of the biggest things I need to, like, work on if I am going to be able to do this in a sustainable way. That's, like, been a big question. Like, can I sustainably do this? And I think what happened this fall is, like, you care so deeply that, like, the amount that I was caring was too much, and it was, like, easier to just shut it down. And that's, like, when I fell into depression, because it's, like, let's just not feel any of this. Right? Like, all of it's too much. I'm caring too much. There's, 15 people's big stuff that I'm sitting with. Like, my body just kind of, like, shut down, right? And that's not healthy either. So I'm finding the balance again. And I think it really, like I said, comes down to, like, making sure that I have people in my life that I can call someone after work. We both work weird night hours, or I'm isolated during the week.
I hella work mornings now. Fun fact.
Oh God.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah,
Different cry.
it's wild. It's like I'll close on like Tuesdays and everything else is not necessarily opens, but I'm there at 7 or sometimes 4:30, and then 9 and 6. So yeah.
Well, I think you touched on like two things that really popped in my head. Like one, I really like your response of like, I'm still learning. Yeah. Which we all are, regardless of like, yeah. I mean, I feel like you get to a point, especially when you're a kid, you're growing up and you look at maybe these like figures within your life, like, man, they got it all figured out, right? And then you realize like, as we start to get a little bit older, further on into our careers, like, all right, we're all just fucking figuring this out.
No one knows what they're doing.
But then also your own personal history, as you mentioned, battles with depression and whatever else that it might be. How has that impacted your ability as like a counselor and as a practitioner within that field, like your own personal experiences? Because I feel like for myself, I'll just speak for myself, going through some of those hardships as well with like health and fitness and mental health as well has drastically improved my own ability to be a coach and to be a better friend, to be a better counselor, to be a better, family, all those things. Like, but for you specifically, how were those instances where your life have bolstered you up to like where you're at now?
Yeah. I think it's been interesting because it's like I was in maybe less than ideal mental health space before entering into Orange Theory, right? Like struggling with depression, anxiety, and really having no like understanding of that. And when I got into counseling, I felt like I had gotten like to a pretty balanced level of mental health where I wasn't experiencing a ton of depression, where I felt like I could manage all areas of my life. So it's interesting being a counselor and kind of being back in that space of depression where I'm like, all I can really do is like show up to work. That's really all I have energy for, right? Like I feel just apathetic in general a lot, right? But I like almost needed to be back in that space to be able to better relate to like my clients that are going through it. Like, and not that every phase has like a purpose, it's hard to say that, but I do think that like my own struggles, it helps me be able to sit with other people in the depth of that. And like when I understand viscerally what it's like when someone is like, I can't get out of bed, like my mom, right? Like doesn't understand what that's like. And when you can say like, yeah, I've been there. I know what it's like to have mold on my plates because I can't do my dishes for a week or two at a time, right? Like that, there's a different level of like being with that and not reacting with judgment when you've been in that place, right? Like I think about, I have a coworker and one of my really good friends now who said, like, one of the counselor that changed her life in addiction was someone who was like, yeah, I've scoured the floor for meth as well, like little particles to smoke. Sorry, this is maybe like more than your average podcast.
The superior, yeah, there we go, yeah.
But, right, like someone who's like, yes, I know what that's like. Yeah. I know the depth of desperation that addiction can bring you to. I've been there. There's nothing shameful about that. But, like, you need people who can be with you in those times because it can be so isolating and so shameful. And when you bring it to the light and you share it with other people and you're like, whether you're in it or not, right, you can say, I've been there too. It just, like, takes, like, half the weight out of it, I feel like, just baseline.
And I gotta imagine it's such a unique area that you work within where you get to see these people from all walks of life just based off of physical appearance or how they present to you. All of a sudden they're coming to you and divulging this information like, oh yeah, just literally yesterday I, as you just mentioned, was on my hands and knees scouring for like particles of meth. And meanwhile, like outside of that, if you were to just like walk past them at a Target, you wouldn't like maybe bat an eye. It's crazy how much is just like behind that little veil that we like to present, you know.
Well, and I think too, like when you talk about that shame, and I think that it's a spiral that kind of like begets more of that behavior. Like if you are feeling shameful or ashamed or bad about doing something, you're typically tend to self-isolate. And then when you do that, you self-isolation, you tend to kind of spiral and like continue to do that behavior. So a lot of it is like comes down to the stigma, right? Depending on what your addiction is, depending on what you're dealing with. Addiction in general is very stigmatized. So if you feel like you have nowhere to turn and you feel like the people that you typically engage and associate with are judging you in certain ways, then you're going to try to find others like you, maybe other people that have the same problem, or you're also going to, again, spiral down that continued use. So I think what you're doing and kind of that ability to relate, an ability able to empathize with people and come from a place of no judgment, which is tough to get to, I'm sure, depending on what's going on. I think that's like really important for actual counseling and actual help rather than simply like a treatment and a go. You know what I mean?
Yeah. And it's not like with clients, I'm always like telling them, I'm not usually telling them my own shit.
Yeah.
But
it's not about you, Abby.
Sometimes I say that. I disclose and I'm like, it's not about me. It's not about me. This isn't the Leo Abby
it
show.
helps. It helps though, yeah.
But I can still like inside I can say I know what that has been like, and like my energy shows up in that, like, how do we not react to what you're going through with shame, right? Like, how do we explore what it would be like if that feeling was taken away, right? Like, if we could approach this as like a neutral thing.
Now, where in your mind do you feel as though we could, a big question here, society, like structurally, like what are the things that we need to do to make that become like more
change the world?
You know what I mean?
Like, president.
But like in your mind, like where are those like little pitfalls that we're having? Like, is that something that it's just a matter of like education, like bringing more awareness? You know, where does that kind of start? Like when you start even having those conversations as a kid, like I didn't learn about. I'm trying to even think about mental health disorders that were, you know, present. I mean, like what, maybe in high school? Like I don't know.
Probably saw it, and probably saw it in pop culture before you actually knew like what it was actually about.
Yeah, it's not regularly discussed. I wasn't regularly educated upon it. And I mean, again, like I don't know, was there even like a high school class about that? I don't remember anything.
No. I mean, I feel like part of it is like bringing it back to a little bit more community-oriented care, right? Like we are so individualistic. We all are focused on our own lives, and to be able to be in more like communal spaces, baseline, I feel like is important. And to be able to talk about these things. I mean, I think that's one of the biggest things that can reduce stigma is education, right? I don't know. How do you all feel about that?
Why do you want to? No, it's I mean, yeah. Ultimately, I think the reason why I think a lot of people, there have been a lot of cases where I think you might feel shame for doing something, but then you realize it's not a big deal. Like how many times it's on like TV shows, you know what I mean? Like, oh, like I do this with my feet. I think it's really lame. And then it's like, I do that with my feet too. I do like, and that's a really stupid example that I made up completely. Well, but like, I think,
your feet?
no, I mean, that was a made up example of something. I don't know. But I think the idea is like, a lot of the times we...
Like you do what with your feet?
Foot fetishes are normal.
Don't worry about it, bro. Yeah.
I mean, hey, no, I mean, fine,
yeah,
I'm just saying, I've never been really like the feet guy.
You're stigmatizing my
I
feet.
mean, maybe you should try it.
Feet? Really? Have you?
Yeah. Suck on some toes.
No! Ooh, those big hairy fuckers.
We're trying. No, not your toes.
Oh.
Not your own toes.
Have you ever sucked on a toe?
Yeah, like 2 days ago.
What? 2 days ago?
Yeah, because we don't believe in stigma, Kory.
Yeah.
I was just saying, wait, have you sucked on a toe?
I don't think so.
You don't.
I don't know. I don't know.
I mean,
Not recently.
I've never done it.
I feel like you know.
I've never done it.
Would
But
you
you're-
though? I don't know. Could have been years ago.
It's like a foot
Yeah.
Yeah.
in your face.
Yeah, as long as someone's like washing their feet.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, plenty of people have weird things about feet, or not
people
weird
want
things about feet, but some people like don't
Smell
like
feet?
feet.
Some people would want.
Wow, that's a big turn on. That's a weird. I don't know.
You know it, Kory. No, you don't have to do it. If you don't want to do it, you don't have to do it.
Everyone
I don't even know what I was gonna say
has
anymore.
their
I don't
own
even know what I was gonna say anymore. I can't remember my topic because all I can think about is feet now. God damn it. Okay, that's what I was. Yes. Okay. That was it. That was where it all started. Was feet. What I mean to say is. What I mean to say. Anybody who was not watching on YouTube, I just looked at Kory. What I mean to say is that a lot of the time we think something is a bigger deal than it is, or we think that something is more shameful than it is. We carry more shame than we need to.
We like hide it in secret, and it builds and builds and builds in that shame cycle, and it becomes this big thing. And bringing it to other people, it's like, oh,
Yeah.
it's okay.
So having actual education rather than like fear tactics would be really beneficial for like addiction. So like and like
Yeah.
and I think a lot of it is like there have been so many things like the war on drugs and like all this stuff that's kind of going on, and obviously like certain things are more dangerous than others, absolutely. But at the same time, if you treat everybody who like uses a drug or like experiences something as like a criminal or someone that to be detested, then they are going to continue that way.
Yeah.
I'm not saying, hey, let's legalize like crack cocaine. Like, not saying that, but what I'm saying is like when you take someone who is experiencing addiction in that way or those things, and you treat them as if they are less than and they are a shitty person and then they're stupid and make poor decisions, like they're not going to get any help.
Yeah. What we talk about is like unconditional positive regard is like a theory of counseling, and just being like, how can I treat this person with love and compassion? I come back to a lot. Like when my own judgment and shit is getting in the way, how can I come back to like, this is a human being who deserves respect and fair treatment.
Yeah.
At the end of the day.
Like,
Right.
when you get into the treatment of those individuals, where do you stand on like pharmaceutical drug use versus like you get to like the instances where reports data showing like, oh, okay, for psychedelic purposes, and like kind of explore that a little bit in like your career field with that.
Yeah, I mean, I think we have clients that come in and like need pharmaceutical medications for like stabilization purposes, and I think mental health medication can be hugely transformative in people's lives and like hugely necessary. I also see like an over reliance on that with like not teaching coping skills, not giving people other access, but oftentimes people that I see need those medications to be able to get in a stabilized place, to be able to learn the coping skills, to be able to build the social supports, where then maybe in like a few years they could determine if they want to continue that or not. That's often what I see. And yeah, there's a huge kind of resurgence of like psychedelic treatment and research. And I think that I think we're at kind of a place in society where a lot of people are suffering mental health wise, and psychedelics can more rapidly induce change. That maybe, something with mental health medication that you take daily, that could help you over years, and you're taking it every day, right? Like a psychedelic could be something where you go in for a certain amount of treatments, and that positively affects your life in a shorter amount of time with lasting benefits where you're not having to take something every single day. I think it's very fascinating and intriguing to me.
Now, why do you think that is? Like, you get one, and psychedelics, let's, like, describe, like, which ones are, like, we talking about, or which ones are the ones that we're seeing within data, within research that are being
mushrooms,
regularly
right?
used.
Huh?
Typically mushrooms, right?
Yeah, I mean, psilocybin specifically,
Psilocybin,
yeah. And then ketamine is huge right now as well for treatment of addiction, PTSD, treatment-resistant depression. That's probably the most, like, widely spread treatment. It's FDA approved, insurance covers it. That would be, it's not a psychedelic, but it's it has dissociative properties and can induce psychedelic-like effects. But, people can go in for that, like, every 2 weeks, go into a treatment. Maybe they only do it for 6 weeks, and, like, depression is significantly reduced. I have seen and heard of clients with suicidal ideology. I have clients who have had suicidal ideation for their whole entire life, since they were 11 years old, 6 years old, right? Like, want to kill themselves every single day. And, like, I don't think the average person walking around understands the burden of what that's like to feel. And that, like, that treatment has taken away that, where they don't have the burden of, like, I want to die every day. And I think that is transformative. Also, MDMA is being studied for treatment of PTSD as well. I think MDMA specifically can really promote connection and feelings of love as well, which, we think about...
Sorry, I'm thinking of the time I'd have taken MDMA. Like, yeah, true, yeah.
But we think about it in, like, a therapeutic sense. PTSD often, ruptures in relationships. People are traumatized in relationships often. That can result in PTSD. And so a drug like that can help us reestablish love and bonds can be transformative in that sense. But it's also not like a one-size-fits-all cure-all either. Everyone has to figure out what works for them. And I think that can be the hard thing, too, is that some people, it might be their Wellbutrin that saves their life. Some people, it might be going to the gym that has made the biggest impact. Some people, it's ketamine infusions that allow them to walk around and not want to die every day, right? Like,
it's almost just baffling that you've had those experiences with stories of individuals who have taken those different substances, have a transformative experience that then now has completely alleviated them. Well, I shouldn't say completely, but, like, drastically.
Drastically.
Alleviated their
70-80% reduction in symptoms,
which
is kind of wild.
Is insane versus, you're on some, like, pharmaceutical drug that maybe has not...
It's like a 60% effectiveness rate
on
average for folks. So it's like 40% of people still, like, are left with, mental health medication not really being effective for them. And that's, like, a large part, right? You think about people who are suffering and the amount that they're suffering, they go to get medication. That takes a certain level of suffering to say, like, I'm not okay, this is unmanageable. And then it still doesn't help or fix anything, Because
wasn't it, like, and you might be a little bit more knowledgeable about me in this, was it, like, around, like, the 70s, like, where all the various, like, psychedelics, it was, like, deemed like a level 1 drug, like, you can't, there's no legalization about it, but now we're starting to see more and more instances like this within research, within medical journals that are demonstrating this, profound impact on mental health, emotional disorders, and whatever that might be present. Like, why is that not more prevalent? Like, is it just now we're starting to see that kind of turn towards this becoming more just accepted?
Yeah.
Oh, well,
I don't know. You
no,
say something.
No, I was turning the microphone. I mean, I was gonna say, like, you probably have, like, you can for sure. I was just, like, in my head, I was thinking, well, yeah, but it's controlled. Like, it's being used, but it's being used for a very specific reason rather than being out in the open.
Recreational use.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, that's kind of what happens in like the 60s, right? Like, there was a lot of research being done in therapeutic realms, but there was also, like, wild recreational use, right? Like, uncontrolled recreational use, which led to kind of the hippie movement and people breaking away from structures and systems that are meant to control them. And that didn't really work out. Like, government doesn't like when all of their citizens don't want to go to war and be controlled. And I think, right, too much expansion in one area, we kind of had backlash. Like, it was, like, released too widely almost. Where like I don't know, I have mixed views on like recreational use and like widespread where there's just like no real intention or purpose of why we're doing things other than an experience. But we kind of saw that backlash after that where things were controlled, we're on drugs, all of that. And now, yeah, I think there's a lot of different lenses in the current view of psychedelics, treatment, how they should be used, what.
Because it sounded like your perspective there was that it was a semblance of like, you know, government wanting to kind of control, recognize like, okay, this is getting a little bit like out of hand with how people are approaching this. There's like, again, there are realities of that. Like,
well,
that's my
not that I am pro government in certain regards, but like think of like in a class if like everybody was just doing whatever the fuck they wanted.
Yeah.
Like that's kind of like you being government, like everybody else being people taking recreational like drugs that are like I don't actually want to do a low row. I'm going to walk
on the floor. That would be disruptive.
I'm gonna walk backwards on the treadmill. I'm not going. Yeah. So I think that's kind of what it's more about. Was like, you know, a lot of the time those things are legalized because, or like banned in certain regards because the officiating orders of in this case the United States deemed it to be too dangerous to have, rather than like, oh, this is terrible, never do it. It's like this is too dangerous to be allowed to be legal completely for everybody. Yeah. And not that I'm again agreeing with that, I'm just saying I think that's kind of the perspective of it. Is like this isn't necessarily evil, but it is dangerous in the wrong hands.
Well, and I think it's important to look at like that kind of shadow aspect of anything, right? Like we think about anything that claims to be like transformational, like in the psychedelic realm, there's also that like shadow darkness side of like what does it look like when things are taken in excess, when abused, recreational use is, you know, like when it is abused, right? And when does that come into play where like some control and some boundaries is important? I don't know.
I think it should be with these psychedelic substances, something where once you again maybe hit a certain age, you have the ability to be able to go in a controlled, safe space to be able to experience that. Again, as we're seeing within research, can have profound impacts on your life and your perspective on things and your openness. And it's just kind of shocking to me that that's not readily available or present.
If it's profitable enough, it will be legal.
You know?
Yeah.
Why is alcohol still legal?
Alcohol being a perfect example. Like, why the fuck is that? You know, it's like, ugh.
And it's like pharmaceuticals don't want something that you just take once and have a transformational experience and never need again. That's
because
not
then that doesn't pay off.
Capitalism doesn't work on that.
They
need
want
something
you. On the big farm.
That's a good point though.
Yeah, that's messed up.
And I don't think I shouldn't say that. I don't know. Like, I don't think things are like, you know, organizations are typically like actively, what's the word for it? Actively like when you're like being vindictive, like malicious. Yeah, actively malicious or vindictive. But I mean, that is the idea. Is that like it's like their job is to make money selling this, and so it's like if I can't sell this anymore, like if everybody in the world was like, I don't know, self-motivated, like I wouldn't have a job.
Yeah.
Right. You know what I mean? If everybody in the world didn't, you know, need someone to like, you know, coach them in fitness, if their form was perfect and they this or that and they all were self-motivated, then I wouldn't have a job. Anyways.
What did you want to talk about today with me?
Oh no, it was the when I wrote it down in the notes app between Kory and I that we have all our ideas on. It was holistic health.
Beautiful.
Yeah. So also we hadn't talked for a while, so I knew what you were doing in like a nutshell. Like I knew that you were doing addiction counseling and things like that, but I didn't know exactly like the ins and outs, kind of what you've been doing and what's been going on. So yeah, I was like holistic health, which makes sense. So.
Again, kind of speaking on the holistic health, we were on the psychedelic, and you had mentioned that you had done, what was it, MDMA?
Molly.
Done Molly?
I mean, when I was younger. Sorry, Mom. Jesus Christ. She listens to this podcast every single episode.
Well,
yeah.
Because like I've only ever done marijuana. Like that's been it. Oh, I can't say that. Fuck. No, hold on. Hold on. Me and my buddy Dakota in Boston, we did coke once. That was it. Just one time.
Hi, Kory's parents.
One time. Hi. Yeah.
I feel embarrassed. I'm not going to disclose my
No. But yes, continue. You were saying?
Well, I was just like, I don't know. Again, I feel like we all come from different experiences with that.
Yeah.
You know.
I mean, it's a party drug. I had friends that knew more about it than I did, so I kind of relied on them to I trusted them to make sure that it wasn't too much or that, we were doing it responsibly, quote unquote. But yeah, I mean, it's definitely something that I don't do anymore. I think the last time I did it I was in college, but that was all, it was 10 years ago, 11 years ago. And I think some of those things are really beneficial, but I've also had a friend pass out when he was on it. So I'm like, that's not cool either.
Yeah.
So it's
being risk aware.
Yeah, absolutely.
And informed when you go into anything.
Yeah.
Anything that you're doing in your life, whether it's, I don't know, drugs, fitness.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but
whatever.
Yeah, so I don't know. It's definitely one of those things where it's I cannot look at it from the perspective of someone who is struggling through addiction, who has had, continual suicidal ideations and things like that too, where it's you're looking at that drug doing different things for different people. You know what I mean? If I do one thing, doesn't mean that a next person is going to do the same thing and have the same result. Because our brains are different, we're wired differently. Do you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. And so for me, it was kind of a party drug use, and it was, a handful of times. It was once or twice, rather than, someone who maybe needs that or needs something like that, a treatment like that to then get into a stable headspace where they're able to, like you said, learn mechanisms, coping mechanisms and things like that to help promote their own health, right? Mine was more just just recreational, right? And it was, and it was something I did regularly, but at the same time, okay, well, if my personality is different, do I get addicted to it? Mm-hmm. If if I'm not working at the time, do I start doing it more? If I have more money, that's a big thing, is actual access to those things. Mm-hmm. Growing up, we go to parties. And it was only when the rich kids came into parties that was there was Coke there, right? Yeah. Because I mean, and not that I ever bought drugs. Just saying. I've bought a lot of drugs. I've bought so many. No
stigma.
Yeah, that's a good point. No, so that's not something that I really partook in. So I obviously didn't know that, but we were very clear of okay, this is only people that could afford this or knew where to find it would be able to get it. And it was always something very sketchy to me, kind of, you know what I mean? And obviously there's still that stigma, especially when you're 17 years old.
When you were kids too.
Right. Well, then you think about a 17-year-old kid, and they're probably not using it in the way that could, or even, not cocaine is different, but using a drug in a way that's actually going to benefit them because of a past trauma that they're dealing with or something like that. So.
Well, and that's an area I would love to be able to explore with you, what, as you mentioned, your experiences with those different substances, what have been some of your
again, I've talked about too much. Again, this is
a public podcast.
This is, yeah.
I mean, what you'd be willing or open to.
Yeah, I mean, I think when I was younger, there was a phase of experimentation for sure. Alcohol for me was what I was first introduced to, marijuana as well as a teenager. And then it wasn't until my 20s, probably 2021, where it was other drugs were introduced, and cocaine and ecstasy, mushrooms, acid, those sort of things. And it was very experimentational. It was very recreational. And alcohol was always something that I would say overused in social settings to cope with social anxiety and just not feeling very comfortable around people, not feeling secure in who I was as a person. I think about I was typically the friend that would black out. I mean, I brought alcohol to Orange Theory. I was drinking.
Yeah, I know.
There was phases of that were not good. This is the reason I work in the field that I do. And so, where that recreational use wasn't just fun anymore, and it begins to take over aspects, or you're able to show up in your life in ways that are conducive or healthy or safe.
Yeah, I think we've seen that in people is when when it starts to when you are with friends or you're with someone and they continue to drink or what that is, and there's a point where it like it's just a weird turn where it stops becoming fun.
Yeah.
You're like, why are you doing this? Why are you bringing this to every event we go to, or like it's 4 p.m. like like it's just that there's that feeling at some point where it's like this has become too much, and I don't know really how to explain it. It's just a very interesting twist of like emotion towards this act.
Mm-hmm. You can like start to see the compulsion in another person's behavior towards a substance. Because, I mean, as, like, sober or, like, your average person who's not dealing with addiction, we'll just say, healthy use of substances, like, you're able to connect, you're able to show up in your relationships, you're able to focus on that and be present with other people. And in addiction, like, your focus just becomes on that substance. So, like, a lot of my relationships were formed around, like, will these people partake in substance use with me, right? And is there someone who wants to spontaneously hang out with me at 4 p.m. and drink, or is there coworkers?
4 p.m. I guess is kind of like a normal time.
Yeah. Normal time.
Like 11 a.m. I don't know. I don't.
Whatever.
It's football season, so it's always drinking time. But yeah.
Or is there a coworker, if I bring a bottle of alcohol into work, that will partake with me, right? Like those sort of things. You seek out relationships and people who are just enabling that behavior versus like genuinely connecting with like the people in your life. And so. Yeah, there was a few years of me reevaluating my relationship with substances in a major way. I haven't drank in about 3 years or done cocaine. Those are the two things I say no to. Completely.
I have my limits.
Good for you, yeah.
Which has like been really important for me. And then, my relationship with marijuana is more complicated. I've seen benefits and negatives in my life. Where alcohol, it's easy to just say, like, that doesn't serve me. That's a no for me. There's not really... Even one drink, the next days I'll feel depressed and hopeless. Like, it just is a depressant on my system, and the pattern in my brain is too wired to those effects. Like, it just doesn't work for me. Yeah. And it will lead to worse things.
So, no alcohol in how long?
3 years.
3 years. See, and I'm about no alcohol in... Yeah, probably like 2+ or something like that. Again, it just kind of came to that moment.
2 years?
I don't think I've had I can't remember. I honestly cannot remember the last time that I had a cocktail or anything.
What? Shut up. I'm on like 18 hours right now.
No judgment here, remember?
Yeah, no.
Thanks.
This is the podcast.
Oh, God.
But yeah.
But right, like, that hasn't been problematic in your life in the same way that it has been in mine, or you've seen it in other people in your life as well. Yeah, and then in the past year as well, like, I have explored psychedelics and kind of what that is, and taken a psychedelic guide program to help me understand and be educated about what I'm engaging in, and, like, having boundaries around what that looks like in my life when things are getting to be too much or not.
What were those? Oh, sorry. So I was just going to say, like, what were those experiences like?
I mean, it varied. But I think... some of the more transformative ones that I've had have been in communal spaces, where it's not just about like the psychedelic experience or visual effects or whatever that may be, but I'm able to like heal my interpersonal dynamics. I think about like this summer I was with a bunch of women, and I'm usually, again, like social anxiety, showing up really insecure, feeling like I can't be myself, and by the end of that experience, it was like I could see myself in every single one of those women, and I could see their insecurities and how they were similar to mine, and I felt so like deeply open and vulnerable with them and connected in a way that like I don't know if it's possible to do that in the time frame that we did without a facilitation of something like that. Where people kind of let their guards down in a way that can be really beautiful. And I left feeling really, I usually leave events like that with women of like, oh my God, they connected and I wasn't able to connect with them and I should have said this, and kind of what you were saying earlier, like dissecting every interaction. And I was able to leave being like, wow, I love this person. Susan is such a beautiful elder in our community, and I see this aspect of myself, and I love her dearly. Like, it reduced all of my anxiety around what I usually have in social interactions and allowed more connection. And it's an experience like that where it's like a controlled dose, and I'm not seeking it the days after or times after and that sort of thing. I can also be with those people without substances. I think that's really important too. I don't know. So
yeah, like an experience like that, you go to like a retreat in a way, you know, in a setting that you feel very comfortable in. Everyone else is going to that with the same intention of wanting to experience this, you know, drug in that way. It's not just like, okay, we're just going to hit up like a party tonight and just go have fun. I mean, I guess there's a lot of people out there that just want to do that too. But again, your mentality and your but like
that's your jam. Hell yeah.
It's like your mentality and your mindset and as to how that like, you know, gets. It's kind of funny to just as you were describing that, you know, this outward pour of just like love and affection and appreciation for those other individuals that were there and present with you that weekend, and you know, you're leaving that weekend with your cup just overflowing in a way. And it was just funny because as you were describing that, I just juxtaposed that with I did think of somebody just going out partying hard on a weekend, following the next morning just like hungover, like why, like oh my god, just a walking zombie, empty, and their cup is drained, and it's so funny to me, just kind of the paradox between the two.
Yeah,
you know?
And like I think that's a guiding post in where what I engage with now is like I want things to feel like additive and nourishing in my life, and if it doesn't feel that way, I'm very cautious about it.
And that's to say, like, and I know that, you know, I'm the only one here that is currently drinking still. But I've cut back quite a bit. I've actually like experienced like very like physical symptoms of like, you know, one and like I had a headache or like whatever. But like, is that also that feeling of like, you know, I wish I didn't really do that. You know what I mean? And it's not a shame thing because again, I'm trying to avoid that spiral. But just thinking to myself, you know, when I'm getting up in the morning, like I probably shouldn't have done that. Like I didn't really need to. Like I had no. You know, and I still do every now and then, and I still because I enjoy the taste of like beer, right? I enjoy the taste, and you know, it's nice to have that little bit, but it's to the point where it's like, yeah, you know, I don't really need it. It's like maybe one or two a week, maybe like one or like two every other week, pretty much. So it's definitely lessened, and you know, I think I could also just make a joke of like me being 32 and like me getting hungover over nothing, which is true. It's age, and I work in the mornings, but I think a lot of it is too that feeling of like I don't really need this necessarily. It's not additive to my life. It's if anything, it's neutral, right?
Yeah, and I mean, it's like we both, when you talk about holistic health, like we've all looked at a lot of different areas of our life and done that kind of like wellness evaluation of like, are these things additive to my life or not? And like one aspect is fitness, but another is like what you are consuming, what you're intaking into your life, whether that's like people, substances, media, that sort of thing, like what you're engaging with, and does it feel like it helps you fill your cup, like you said, show up with more empathy, compassion, kindness, love, like those sort of things, or does it detract and make you hate yourself and others and like, or feel like a shell of yourself, or not be able to show up in relationships in the way that you want.
Well, it's I wonder too, kind of this is a full circle thing because we were talking about taking that almost like self-eval, like in a way, you know, doing those practices, like maybe you journal, you're very like introspective, but how many people again are finding themselves on those hamster wheels doing the day by day, they're, you know, just this white noise surrounding them with social media content or, you know, television that's not, again, like really adding to their cup. They're just kind of and that, you know, like you're a big proponent of taking those times for self-reflection and journaling and various like self-care practices, which I just feel is not the, I don't know. Would you feel it's safe to say like that's not typically the norm for a lot of people to involve in a lot of those like self-care practices or being more introspective and taking time for themselves and sitting with themselves?
Yeah, I don't know. I can't say like how prevalent it is. I think that the world could probably use more, but I think there's a lot of, I don't know. That's a complicated question, and it looks different for everyone, right? Like my thing might be meditating and journaling and taking baths, and that might not be what works for someone else too. And I just am more and more also embracing like the transformative power of being with people in community, and less almost of a focus of like, am I doing all the self-care? Am I checking all the boxes? Do I only feel good if I've journaled and walked and done this? Like, that doesn't work for me anymore, right? Like, it's just like, these practices help aid my life and I feel good when I do them, but it doesn't, I don't know, it's not like a checkbox to be filled or a moral failing if I don't do it.
Sure.
And it's going to look different for everyone.
I think that a lot of the like stereotype of self-care, when you think about it, like, what do you imagine? You know, I think of like a bath and like a candle and like music and like solo, right? Yeah. And I think that stereotype has kind of become the norm because of the context of the actual culture at large, where it's like, if our culture is go, 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 make as much money as you can, individualistic, like the break to that, or like the self-care aspect of that, is like taking time to slow down and bring everything down to a halt, and do something that you enjoy doing, that doesn't necessarily, you're not doing it for the sake of making money at it. Yeah. But to your point, self-care looks so different for everybody all the time. Like, Kory, you might have a week where your self-care is like going out with friends, right? Because you're like, I miss these people, like my friends in town, like whatever, like I'm back in Winona, like I'm seeing some whatever. Like, that might be a form of self-care for you one week. The next week, maybe you have a shitty week and like you do want some time with you and Stevie, who is your dog. So cute. I love her so much. So that might be a form of self-care, but like, you know, should you feel like, oh man, I shouldn't go out because I want to take care of myself? Like, no, it's like that social community, that part of you can be that self-care that week, but the next week it'll look completely different.
Well, it's kind of funny too, because like in some respects, like, all right, if we're using that example, because I'm very involved within obviously like health and fitness and prioritizing that for myself, but you know, self-care for me on a particular night, it might be a Friday night, Saturday night, where, okay, perfect example, I'm going to like a play tonight. Play starts at 7:30. I'm typically in bed all the way throughout the week by 8 o'clock. Like 8 o'clock, 8:30. I am an early riser.
I am just rise and grind, baby, rise and grind.
That's pretty much it.
You texted me today at 10 right when I woke up, and you were like, done with work. And I'm like, what the fuck?
I'm what? Where am I?
Like, I've been dreaming. You've been working this whole time.
Hey, he was up with me at 6 a.m. at Orange Theory.
Rise and grind. Well, yeah, and then, you know, that self-care, okay, if I was doing it just to, I don't know, prioritize like sleep and everything else, like, okay, yeah, then I would only just keep a specific bedtime and stay consistent with that. But like my self-care in that instance would actually be to like, okay, no, don't prioritize sleep and everything else. Like, go out and have a night out with your friends. And it's finding that balance that I think is, you know, it's the most challenging aspect of that as well. Like, we're wanting to be social. How many times have we at that point made plans with a friend and it's about 4 o'clock and you're like, oh, dang it, I don't know if I really want to go anymore. But it's like, okay, you got to prioritize things. Like, you got to show up, because you were saying, you know, do I have this like checklist of like, did I get out for my walk today? Do I do that? And that's how I go about it, is making sure that I'll still show up, even if I don't want to do the 10 minutes of reading, or if I do my 5 minutes of, you know, yoga or breath work. If I don't feel like it, I'm still have that like checklist. So I still just do the damn thing and like show up for myself, continue, and make that a pattern of behavior. So I thought it was interesting because of how people are going to approach that differently. You know, even if I don't feel like it, I still have it on my list. And more often than not, I'm going to get into that practice that I committed myself to. And then I'm going to be more at peace with myself afterwards. Like, the idea of, I don't really want to work out today, but I'm going to show up and I'm just going to go through the motions, and I feel better for having done it afterwards, you know?
Oh, that's a really good idea. I mean, yeah. I mean, for me, I wish I lived my life like that sometimes. I don't have it as...
No, I'm not. As much as I
have to for work. Like, I definitely have been more like organized in the last year or 6 months or so, or what have you. But yeah, I mean, I think part of it is like, okay, well, if you have a checklist for self-care, if you're like, hey, like I need to do this, and this, or like on my day off, for instance, I think that can lead to, one, that feeling of like you're not changing anything from when you were doing your normal routine, right? Which is fine. Like, if you, like, let's say you have a day off, you know, you might on your work days, like, get up, work out, do this, do like very regimented. If you're structuring your self-care on like weekends, like, you might find that you're not changing anything. You're just just adding structure to something else. There's also the idea of if you have that checklist and you don't get to something, that somehow like a failure of that. So I think for you, like that's going to work for you. For other people, it might not work for them. You know what I mean? Because like it doesn't seem to me, Kory, it doesn't seem like you're a guy that like struggles to like chill. I don't know, to chill.
Struggle with motivation.
Yeah, or motivation. That too. Chill. Wait, that's the same thing.
Things.
Well, like I'm saying, like Kory, you don't strike me as like, oh man, this guy never takes care of himself.
Yes.
He's working to the bone. He's like I don't think that of you because you're not like lashing out at people. Like you're like a very kind human being, and like you're typically very like, we're typically very like, not necessarily jovial because like you like everybody has their moments and like you should never feel like you have to be happy, but like you're generally very like engaging with people. Like it doesn't seem like you have your moments, but it doesn't really seem like you're like stressed out to the max, you know.
Yeah, you're not like going so hard and just like keeping with the task that you're like stressed and anxious and not being able to show up. Like you have a good balance, but you're also much more of like the motivation, just do it guy, where I'm like, that doesn't work as much as sometimes I'm like, just do it, like, right? And like with different mental health places, that isn't always possible. And sometimes for me, it's like having different systems for how I might show up. And like as a woman too, my energy levels are going to fluctuate much more than you as men. I mean, this is
no, you're right. You're right. You're scientifically correct.
Scientifically, though, we could say like people with testosterone-based bodies, you could hit a testosterone in the morning. Usually, you have the same energy. That's the same cycle every day. You have a 24-hour cycle. Like I'm on a monthly cycle, and sometimes, like right now, I have a lot of energy. It's like the peak of my cycle. So I'm like, I want to talk to you. I want to engage. But like, talk to me a week and a half ago, 2 weeks ago, and like, shit's different. Maybe I would have been crying this whole time. Like, who knows? And working out and self-care has to look different for me in those cycles, right? Like, I know I can do more. I can show up more. I can make more plans right now. And then I have to have the ability to say, like, this is going to look different for me in 2 weeks. And how do I honor that cycle within myself? And I've spent a lot of time getting to know myself and my own cycle in that way. So there's just differences within everyone, and that's, I don't know, we gotta look at the human being.
It's a beautiful note.
How long have we been talking?
Just over like about an hour and a half.
Yeah. Just flying by.
Cool. I think that's probably a good place to end it. I don't know. What do you think, Abby?
Is there anything else you wanted to talk about?
Kory, what are we going to talk about?
We're just a little battle back to me.
We're defaulting.
Like
no. I think that was very good. I think like, you know, a lot of what this is about, and you know, we've only had one other guest on the show, Ellen, and it was like, yeah, we kind of had an idea, but for the most part, it's like, you know, you just kind of let the person talk. And I think one thing that, you know, we do a good job of, and that you're a part of this, like, you're part of this circle, is that we when we get together and talk, it's very easy and very chill. And so I knew we were going to touch a little bit on kind of what you were up to, especially kind of in regards to like the fitness space, because that's also where we met you back in the day. But for the most part, no, I'm just glad you're here and glad you were able to share a little bit of what, you know, you do with us, and just a little bit of this different perspective of like, here's where I'm coming from. Like, this is what you're trained in, and also this is where you've been as a human being. And I think that's a really nuanced and, you know, part of conversation that people that, you know, are listening to this might not have ever heard from either I or Kory to this point. So
yeah, bring a little more perspective on like the multitudes.
Yeah.
Of who we all are as people.
No black and white takes.
That's
just
one rule here.
Genuine advice and good conversation. So that will do it for us today on the Average Bros Gym pod. Kory, you spent about half the episode with the sun like just streaming down your face. So
you get a wicked tan just on the right cheek.
So like straight lines too. It's gonna be great. But yeah, also like you're Hufflepuff, so you deserve to bask in the sunlight a little bit.
Yeah, I remember I'm Hufflepuff too.
We're in the same house?
Yeah.
No shit.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
Would it? Yeah.
Yeah. It's like core human beings. You guys are very like, oh, I love that. Well, friends, thanks for joining us on the Average Bros Gym podcast. You can find us on all the social medias except for, well, Twitter, we're just followed by bots. That's really all. I looked at the followers the other day and it was all just like
they have a lot of
like Jessalina 4537X24. Like I was like, oh god damn it. Kissy lips. You can find us at X at Average Bros Gym Pod, ABG Gym Bros Pod. Yes. And then email us at averagebrosgympodcast@gmail.com. No, not really. No. Cool. Every once in a while.
Have you gotten random questions? I wanted to email you guys.
We have gotten questions. We have also gotten some comments on the Spotify and the YouTubes. So thanks for that. Any engagement helps a lot. Like, if we are trying to grow this, which, it's liking, subscribing, clicking, listening, all of that plays a big role. I do look at the metrics obsessively. So make me happy, please. I know. I'm like, how is it today? What's it today? What's it today? Like,
if I just click on it and then don't listen to your podcast, does that count as a metric?
Yeah, but it also counts as negatively against us because you're only listening to a second of it before you don't listen.
So when I listen to 3 5-minute clips before I came on this podcast to get a sense of what y'all talked about, that goes down?
Well, it's like has a graph and it's like here's where people listen to, and so the idea is like your people listening all the way through. So like ideally it would be like 100%, but it's not 100%. Don't worry about what it's at. It's actually pretty good. I'm just appreciative. No one wanted, people did not want to hear us talk about the Vikings. That episode got our lowest amount of clips. It's okay.
I don't want to hear about that. I would have.
Well, you skip ahead.
We
should. I think I did actually put the timestamps on it, so you should be able to find it. Okay.
Those were helpful.
Do you want timestamps on your episode or no?
I'm not going to listen to it. I'm never going to listen to this again. I was on a podcast once, a year ago, and I'm never going to listen to myself talk. I fucking hate it. I won't rewatch a yoga class that I've done virtually. Absolutely not.
It's like hearing yourself on the voicemail for the first time. You're like, oh God, that's my voice.
As soon as you leave here, this never happened.
I'm like, whatever was said, it's just this space, and I
was never here.
This was just for us.
I listen to each episode numerous times so that I can edit it and talk about it, which actually makes it kind of cool though, because then I can really call back episodes really easily. So that's been kind of fun. But coordinate,
That adds value.
Yeah, thank you. Oh my God, see, I already feel
that's what we do. Add value to people's lives.
That's honestly a lot of what we're trying to do.
At its core, it's pretty much it.
On Instagram at Average Bros Gym. On Instagram, that's Average Bros Gym Podcast. And then, send us an email, send us some Instagram questions, some DMs. We love doing Q&A. One of those episodes is coming up again.
What's your alter ego? That's my question.
Oh, we're doing podcast alter ego?
Yeah.
Okay.
5 more minutes. Focus.
5 more minutes. Wait, a podcast alter ego. Or can you just any alter ego?
I just wanted you to answer that question right now, but
say we're like whole thing in our alter ego.
Well, who's my alter ego?
You can show up as our alter egos. Who's this Pump Daddy?
You did it!
Yes. You had to get it in.
Pump Daddy.
There's a pre-workout designed by a guy on Instagram. Where do a lot? Noel Diesel? Diesel? I don't know. He's from South Africa, but he's got a pre-workout, and it's called Pump Daddy, and that was the first thing that Abby saw when she walked into my house. She was like, wait, it goes in the kitchen. Wait a minute. Pump Daddy? Pump Daddy, yeah.
All right, episode number 2 with Abby.
Yeah, we'll talk about it.
Yeah.
Our alter egos. Thanks for listening, everybody. Have a great rest of your day. Maybe I'll just cut this whole entire... No, I won't cut that part out. Actually, I don't really edit that. I mean, well, I do, but not... Okay. All right, guys.
Love you all.
Pump Daddy out.
God damn it.